Hey guys, what's good? Jody and Bryson here. So in today's video I wanted to talk about toxic masculinity. It's a term, a label that's thrown around a lot nowadays. So as I'm a confidence coach for men, I thought I would jump on and talk a little bit about it and give you my thoughts. And yeah, so let's dive into it. What is toxic masculinity? What does it really mean? You know, there's so many people that are using this term and they are having different ideas, different definitions of what toxic masculinity means. Now, let's have a look at the actual definition so we can dive into it and dissect it a little bit and see, what it all means. So I've got the definition here, and it says that the concept of toxic masculinity is used in academic and media discussions of masculinity to refer to certain cultural norms that are associated with harm to society and to men themselves. Traditional stereotypes of men as socially dominant, along with related traits such as misogyny and homophobia, can be considered toxic, due in part to their promotion of violence, including sexual assault. So having a little look at this definition, I think that there seems to be a relation or an assumption that being socially dominant is interchangeably linked to those negative aspects like being toxic, being misogynistic, being racist, being homophobic, all of those things. But what I think is important to understand and important to acknowledge is that being socially dominant, being in a position of leadership and a position of power, does not mean that you have a broken moral compass, right? It doesn't mean that you don't understand the importance of your social responsibility. So the reason that I find that this definition, this label, is extremely damaging to a lot of men, but also to women as well, is because it demonizes certain characteristics, certain traits that are predisposed in men. And there is nothing actually inherently wrong with traditional masculinity. There's nothing wrong with the man that is the provider. There is nothing wrong with the man who doesn't show his emotions all the time, that's quite stoic. There's nothing wrong with the guy who's driven and competitive. But it's when those traits become unhealthy to a point where they are damaging to other people. But you could say that about anything. You could say that about women. I know seems to be a discussion that is falling at the feet of men, and men seem to be on trial right now for all of this stuff. But we're living in an age now where people are accepting that gender isn't just this polarizing opposites. We no longer conform to very specific gender stereotypes, or the majority of people don't anyway, right? So we've got this whole transgender movement. We've got this sort of the pronouns and all of that sort of stuff, which I don't pretend to be massively clued up on, but for me it's a double standard, because when people are saying, oh well, I can be man, I can be a woman, I can be neutral, that's fine. If that's how you want to identify, that's how you feel about yourself. But then we can't be saying that masculinity is only something that affects men. Women can be very masculine as well. We can have very feminine men, and that's not necessarily an amazing thing either. It depends on the situation. But what's most important thing is not whether someone is perceived as being masculine or feminine. What's more important is their ethics, their moral codes. What they believe in, whether they feel like they're doing the right thing in their life or not, whether they're being honest. And the problem with this term toxic masculinity is, as I've said, it demonizes certain traits, certain characteristics that are inherent and natural in a lot of men, because that's the way that we have been raised. You know, we weren't socialized around emotion. We weren't socialized around doing more feminine activities and feminine things necessarily. Like my personal experience is that I grew up playing a lot of sport. I was extremely competitive with a lot of guys. And yeah, there were times where there would be conflict, times where there would be violence and stuff like that. Not something that I personally got involved with, but I saw a lot of that growing up. You know, and the opposite side is true of girls and of women. You know, they're socialized in a different way. They're socialized more around emotion, and to be honest with what I saw from women, some of that was just as bad, just as toxic as what it was from guys. You know, I saw girls that were backstabbing their friends, you know, talking about them behind their back, being really gossipy, really bitchy, and really dishonest. So, you know, which one is better? You know, neither really, neither of them are particularly healthy or good, right? But there seems to be this condemning of men and masculinity and misogyny, and I understand why, because we live in a patriarchal society. We live in a society that is run by white, elite, superior men. But the thing is, this idea of toxic masculinity is driven by radical feminists on the whole, and their issue isn't necessarily with all men, but it's with the 1% of men that are making the decisions. And this term, this label, does not help to achieve the things that they're wanting to achieve. So, you know, like, we have a lot of issues going on in the world right now. We have a lot of homelessness, we have a lot of poverty, we have people starving, you know, people that don't have access to decent healthcare. We have people that, you know, are being treated unfairly, that are having their human rights taken away from them, and all of this sort of stuff. And I think it's, you know, this idea of toxic masculinity for me is like it's very much driven by the media. It's driven by mainstream media, and what you've got to remember is that the 1% of these elite, superior men that are in charge control the media, and they're controlling the narrative, and they're creating dogma, all right, which is then feeding into the mainstream people. And it's basically like throwing a piece of meat from the outside into the ring, and everyone is fighting over that piece of meat, right? Whilst the person who's thrown that meat is off there, like living a cushy life, doing whatever they want. All right, so this term toxic masculinity is not impacting those men at the top. It's not getting them to, it's not challenging them, it's not holding them accountable to their actions and what they're doing, because they're exempt from all of that. Unfortunately, we live in a world where these people can do whatever they want and get away with it. And what do we do about that? As a society, how can we control that? Well, that's probably a topic for another video, but what I want to talk about, what I want to suggest is that you stop being brainwashed by mainstream media, because it's being controlled by the 1%. It's being the narrative is being controlled by them and what they want you to do and what they want you to follow. So I suggest that you detach from mainstream media and you generate your own opinion and your own belief on these things, because this term is extremely negative. It's very, very destructive, because as a man, you know, we already live in a society where there is a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility on us as men, and we don't necessarily understand how to operate in this world. Do I become a more emotional, feminized man and lose respect from all of the men around me, and therefore not achieve the things I want in my life, like a good career, business, like a relationship, and all of this other stuff, right? Or on the opposing side, do I just conform to what all the other men are doing, you know, becoming a misogynist and being super alpha, super masculine, and not caring about anyone else? You know, so there seems to be a bit of a trap, and it feels like we're being forced, we're being controlled into becoming there only seems to be one version of a man which is acceptable in today's society, and I just think that's very limiting for a lot of men whilst we're trying to figure stuff out, we're trying to figure out who we are and our place in the world. And you may think that this is trivial, you may think that we deserve it, alright, but at the end of the day we did not create this society, we did not create the patriarchy, we are not responsible for the decisions of world leaders that are making very poor ethical choices. We are just as much products of the system as you are if you're a woman and you're watching this video. So with that being said, stop attacking masculinity, stop attacking men. You know, put your blame at the doors of the right people and hold them people accountable. And I don't have the answers, I don't have solutions, I don't know how to do that. But what I'm saying is don't put the blame on people that haven't even done anything wrong, that haven't deserved it. Alright, but at the same time, you know, there's some horrific stuff that men do. There's a lot of misogyny, a lot of homophobia, a lot of racism, all of that stuff, but that is toxic behaviour, right? That is not interchangeable with masculinity. It's got nothing to do with masculinity. That's to do with people being raised in the incorrect way, having a poor upbringing, and having a very weak ethical boundaries. All right, so. And that goes for women as well. Women can have really weak ethical boundaries as well. We don't brand the term toxic femininity, do we? We don't start branding that around. So I think this is an important issue to talk about. Something that I posted in my men's community the other day. So if you are a man and you're watching this video, then I'll leave a link to my men's community in the description box below. And you can go ahead and join that for more discussions like this. And yeah, so I think it's important to talk about because male suicide is very high right now. Men really struggle when it comes to opening up. They really struggle when it comes to being vulnerable and sharing their emotions, and having someone point a gun at you and say, hey look, you need to cry or you're toxic masculinity, you've got toxic masculinity. That isn't helpful. That doesn't help men to open up. That makes them even more closed off, more unlikely to share their emotions and feelings. We need to be empowered to express and to share, not judged and blamed and controlled. So with that being said, I think it's important to focus on the solutions. How do we help men to be more open, to express themselves more? Well, as we do that by listening, we do that by creating a non-judgmental space for them. We do that by not throwing their vulnerability back in their face when they've done something wrong. And that's something that we've got to work on as a society, you know, as men and women. We've all got to work on that. And I think the idea that men don't cry, that men aren't emotional, you know, I think it's bullshit. I think a lot of men do. A lot of men are emotional. A lot of men do open up. A lot of men do cry. I'm a crier myself, and I cry a lot more than probably all the women in my household, in my family. And in fact, you know, for the majority of relationships that I've had, friendships with girls, I've been the one who's been more emotional. So the idea that it's only men that have this problem with suppressing emotion is just not true. It's not factual. You know, we live in a society that teaches people to bottle up their emotions and to push them down. And that's not just a male thing, that is a societal thing. So that's my thoughts on toxic masculinity. If you enjoyed this video, press the like button. Let me know what your thoughts are on toxic masculinity below, and subscribe to the channel if you want to catch more videos like this in the future. I'll see you all in the next one.